Okay. Just did finger guns. That's cool. What's up everyone, my name is Kelsey. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are doing my July wrap up, so talking about all the books I read in July, which is a lot. So I only have 38 minutes of recording time left on my camera, so we're gonna have to do this quick. Stats for July, 14 books total, 3,491 pages read, 18 and a half hours listened. My average rating was 4.5, which is insane. That's unheard of. In June it was 4.38 and I thought that was crazy. Wait, no, that's not right. All right, let's go backwards. That was actually my average rating for August, which I've only read 2 books in. So average rating for July is 3.53, which is much worse than 4.5. Oh well. That's still good though, 3.53. It's actually the worst it's been all year. Oh well. 5 contemporary, 5 fantasy, 2 historical, which is probably why my rating's so low, 1 nonfiction, 1 romance, 2 audiobooks, 7 ebooks, 5 physical books, 2 adult, 3 middle grade, and 8 YA. All right, the first book I read in July is Laura Dean Keeps Breaking Up With Me by Mariko Tamaki and Rosemary Valero O'Connell. This is a young adult graphic novel that is basically about a toxic relationship. So our main character, what is her name? Freddie, has been dating Laura Dean on and off for a long time. I don't know, what's high school for a long time? A while. But Laura Dean keeps breaking up with her and it's a very toxic situation for her. And this is really like, I don't know how to describe this story. It's not really a slice of life, but it's just about Freddie coming to terms with the fact that just because she loves Laura Dean and just because Laura Dean loves her, that doesn't mean that they belong together, that they should be together. It was really good. I ended up giving it 4 stars and I really love the art style. Let's see if I can find a good. It's kind of monotone with pink and the lines are really clean, which is something I've kind of discovered I need in a graphic novel in order to enjoy it. There's some like styles that are messier and I just don't vibe with that. Okay, book 2, The Boy in the Black Suit by Jason Reynolds. This is a young adult contemporary about a boy who gets a job at a funeral home after his mom dies in order to help out with the bills at home. And it's basically just a story about the main character, Matt, coming to terms with his grief and learning to cope with that. There's also a little bit of like the beginning of a relationship in here, but I didn't think it was overwhelming. I was a little worried going into it that it was going to be like a straight up romance, but it's just like the beginning of a new relationship and I think it worked really well. And I liked both of the main characters, and Jason Reynolds is really, really good at writing, at giving characters a lot of personality within just a few lines or a few pages. So there are a bunch of side characters in this book that I just got really attached to because they were so well written. I give that one 5 stars. Jason Reynolds books, I've read 2 of them now. They both got 5 stars, so I'll definitely be reading more Jason Reynolds. Book 3 is Feathers by Jacqueline Woodson, which is actually a middle grade. It actually might be younger than middle grade. Now that I think about it, it's more like a grade school level. But it's sort of a historical contemporary. It takes place in the 60s, like shortly after the Vietnam War, and it's just about a young girl who's in the 5th grade and a new boy comes to their class, and she is in a school with all black kids, and this new kid is white. So he gets mocked and made fun of for being the only white kid, but he says he's not white, and he's bullied over that fact. So the main character has to figure out how she wants to deal with these bullies and how she's going to stand up to her classmates. And it was an interesting story. I just feel like, it was kind of surface level. I only gave it 3.5 stars. I haven't read a lot of books for this age group, so as I read more, I might just discover that that's kind of a convention of the age group, so I'll have to see. It was a quick read though, only 118 pages. Okay, the next book I read was The Girl Who Drank the Moon by Kelly Barnhill. I read this one as an audiobook from the library, and it is a middle grade fantasy with a really interesting premise. So this is set in a small village where every year the townspeople sacrifice the youngest baby in the village. They leave this baby out in the woods for the witch, but the witch in the woods doesn't know why these people are leaving a baby out in the woods for her. So every year she goes and rescues this baby who's just left in the middle of nowhere, and she takes the baby to a new village to be adopted by a loving family. But one year she is traveling with the baby and accidentally feeds her starlight? I can't remember which is which. She feeds her Moonlight instead of starlight, which gives her magical abilities, and because those abilities can be dangerous, the witch has to raise this girl herself in the wood. And really the whole plot of the story is about Luna growing up and discovering her magical abilities, but also there's a second perspective within the village of a boy discovering why these children are left in the woods every year, and the mystery side of that. So pros for this book are that all of the characters are really compelling. There are a bunch of creatures in the woods that live with the little girl whose name is Luna, and they're a lot of fun and they have a lot of personality. There's a dragon that lives with her who is just really funny. He thinks he's a full-size dragon, but he's actually tiny, like fits in pockets, so he calls everyone around him giants. He thinks the little girl and the witch Zan are all giants and he's a regular-sized dragon. It's just funny. I loved Luna as a character, and I loved her relationship with Zan that has this like grandmotherly relationship. I really liked the mystery of the village and what was actually going on. But my cons for this book are that it is really, really long for a middle grade book, and it kind of dragged itself out. Definitely could have been cut down. There were a lot of scenes that I thought were like unnecessary. They didn't add anything to the story, and that's pretty much it. Like, I was interested in the premise, but it just went on for so long that I got bored. So I ended up giving it 3 stars. Okay, next is The Watsons Go to Birmingham, 1963 by Christopher Paul Curtis. This is like a classic historical fiction for children, I guess. And it's just about this family from Flint, Michigan, who goes on a family vacation to Birmingham, Alabama in 1963. The beginning of the novel really, though, is just character setup. It's a very character-driven novel, which is a little unusual for the age group, but really that was like the character development was the best part of the book. But halfway through the novel, that's when they take their trip to Birmingham, and while they're there, they experience a bombing at one of the churches, which is based on a real event that happened in Birmingham in '63. And it goes into sort of the trauma that the kids in this family experience and how they try to recover from that. The pros for this book are that the character development is so good. I love the way Christopher Paul Curtis wrote the main character. I can't remember anyone's names this month. Wrote how he reacted to the bombing and how he attempted to cope. It felt very realistic, especially for a child his age. And the relationships were written really well. The relationship between him and his brother especially, there's a lot of tension. They're very mean to each other at times, but it just felt really real. My cons for this book are that, once again, I felt like it was really long, unnecessarily long for the content of the book, especially since the blurb, the summary is about this trip to Birmingham, and it doesn't take place until halfway through the novel. They don't start traveling. I also thought some of the dialogue was like really stilted and just didn't flow very well, and some of the scenes were put together, what's the word? Like the transitions between scenes were very jarring at times. So I ended up giving it 3 stars. Like, obviously I'm not the target market for this book, so I wasn't expecting to adore it. So 3 stars, it was fine. Okay, next is Codename Verity by Elizabeth Wein. This is a historical fiction novel set in World War II. It follows 2 characters whose plane crashes in Nazi-occupied France. One of them is captured, one of them flees and takes refuge with the resistance. I did not like this book. I read this for school, and I was looking forward to it because I've heard so many good things from a lot of people I trust on BookTube. So even though I normally don't like historical fiction, I was still looking forward to this. Okay, the first half of this book is from the woman that is captured, from her perspective. And it's written as if it's first person, written as if she is writing information down for her captors. So she's been tortured and she's giving up information in exchange for, not being tortured anymore. But she's writing down these accounts from her friend's perspective, and they play it as sort of a way for her to feel distanced from the information as like a coping mechanism, but it just didn't feel very genuine to me from the start. And also, since this girl is writing from another girl's perspective and telling stories that she wasn't around for, like, you're forced to either believe that her friend told her all of these stories in minute detail, or she's embellishing, in which case I can't really trust what she's saying. So I couldn't really connect to that part of the story at all. And then the second half of the book is from her friend's perspective in the resistance, and even it really drove me, just the concept for the way each perspective was written, I didn't like at all. And it like really fucked up the whole story for me, because in the second half of the book, she's writing in sort of a journal where she's writing down her own experiences in detail. But even in her journal, she says she should not be writing it down. She's like writing down code names and like secret information. And if it got into the wrong hands, that would obviously be really bad. And she acknowledges that in her journal and keeps fucking writing. It didn't make any sense. And then the end of this book, I hated a lot. And you know, this is why I don't read about wars, because everybody fucking dies. And that's not a spoiler, because clearly it's a war and people die. But the way shit went down in this book, I hated. And it's foreshadowed the whole time, but I didn't pick up on it because I'm stupid. God, I did not like it. All right, 2 stars for that one. 1 stars are reserved for books that I think are like genuinely harmful or offensive. So 2 stars. Next is Butterfly Yellow by Kahana Lai. I think I got that right. I looked up the pronunciation, but I'm hoping for the best here. I listened to this audiobook. It's another historical fiction set in the late 60s, early 70s, and it follows our main perspective character, who is a refugee from Vietnam. And when she was a child, she took her brother to try and leave Vietnam together. But her brother was younger than her, and he was taken from her arms, and they were separated. So she was stuck in Vietnam, and her brother was taken away. So here they are 11 years later, I believe, and she has finally made her way to the US. She's staying with an uncle, but she is determined to find her little brother. It doesn't take long for her to find him, but clearly he is much older now. He was 3 years old when he was taken. He doesn't remember her at all, and he doesn't remember Vietnam. So they have nothing to connect over, and she's determined to build a relationship with him. At the same time, there's another perspective character whose name I don't remember, and he is a cowboy, or determined to be a cowboy. He wants to join the rodeo and follow his rodeo star favorite around. And those two meet up early on, and they end up working at a ranch together while she's trying to build this relationship with her brother. So pros for this book are the relationship between the 2 main characters was like really funny. It's sort of a friendship that could possibly become more like shades of romance eventually, and their banter was really funny. The main character doesn't speak English very well, so there's like a bit of a language barrier and a communication gap that they have to deal with. And just the way they interacted was really funny. And more pros, the main character's journey was like really, really harrowing. And the way it's slowly revealed and the way her trauma manifests was really heartbreaking, but very realistic. My cons for this book are that the characters were very one-dimensional. It felt like they had very little background, either of them, but mostly the guy whose name I don't remember. I mean, he only cares about being a cowboy and being in a rodeo, and like I didn't understand his motivations, or I guess his motivations just weren't very deep. And then the other main character, and this is sort of, I can understand why it would be intentional this way, because her sole focus for the last 11 years of her life has been finding her brother, but that means that she didn't really have much personality beyond that. So it was really hard to get connected to anyone in the story. I ended up giving this 2.5 stars. I gave it 3 stars on Goodreads. I'm not a dick, but I just didn't really enjoy it that much. Like, it was okay. It was okay. Oh, my other problem was with the audiobook. I don't recommend the audiobook at all. And it's primarily because the main character, is obviously Vietnamese, and that's her first language. So the narrator uses that accent, but only some of the time. So only when the main character is speaking out loud or is speaking to herself in her head. But I wish the narrator had just picked an accent, either no accented English or accented English, because switching between the two all the time was almost impossible to listen to. I had to listen to it at 1.25 speed, and normally I'm at 1.75 or 2 times speed, just because I had to readjust how I was listening every time she switched an accent. I didn't take a rating off for that because it's not the book's fault that I didn't like the narrator. Okay, I have been talking too long. I'm running out of time. We have to go faster. Next was A Blade So Black by L.L. McKinney. This is it's described as a modern day Alice in Wonderland meets Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and that's pretty much right on. It follows the main character Alice. Almost immediately after her dad dies, she comes across this creature in the middle of Atlanta and a guy killing it. And this guy is shocked when Alice can see him, and he offers to train her to become a protector of this gate from Wonderland to the real world. Alice accepts, training ensues, and we sort of pick up a year later. So I really loved this book. And my pros are that Alice was such a great main character, and I loved the world building. I loved the way L.L. McKinney described Wonderland. It just felt like really magical, but also dark and almost eerie in its wonder. I also loved Alice's relationship with her mom, and I actually saw L.L. McKinney speak last year sometime, and she specifically brought this up, how in young adult fantasy novels, like so often the parents just aren't really around. Alice's mom is around. She is constantly checking up on Alice. She is worried about her and, you know, is hounding her to do her homework and telling her to do things around the house, and I just loved that because it felt so realistic. There's this scene where Alice's mom leaves her a note to take beef out of the freezer by noon, and Alice forgets and her mom yells at her, and it was like transported back to my mom's house. It was just so good. There's also, I mean, there's some romance in here between her and her mentor, which like skews me out a little bit because he's one of those like immortal, ageless kind of love interests, but it didn't bother me too much because he wasn't like creepily pursuing her or anything. It felt pretty organic. And then her relationship with her friends was really great. I just really loved everything about this book. I gave it 5 stars. I plan to read the book 2 this week. I had to order it from my local bookstore and it finally came in. So definitely continuing on with the series. Okay, the next book I read was Calamity Jack by Shannon Hale, Dean Hale, and Nathan Hale. This is a graphic novel. I'm not going to talk too much about it because I didn't enjoy it at all, but it was sort of a Jack and the Beanstalk retelling. I just didn't think it was very good. I didn't really enjoy the art style. I felt the pacing was weird and off, and the characters just weren't that interesting. Yeah, I just didn't really care for it. I gave it 2 stars. Next is Juliet Takes a Breath by Gabby Rivera. This is a contemporary, young adult contemporary, set in 2003, where our main character Juliet, who is a Puerto Rican lesbian, and on the night she leaves for an internship with her favorite author, who wrote a book called Raging Flower about feminism and being in touch with your womanhood, etc. The night she leaves for an internship with this woman, she comes out to her family as a lesbian, and it doesn't go great. So a few hours later, she leaves. She's in Portland. She's dealing with a strained relationship with her mom because of coming out, and a long distance relationship with her girlfriend that is kind of falling apart, and her internship with Harlow is not what she was expecting. So this book talks a lot about Juliet sort of discovering queer culture in general and all of these things she's never encountered before, polyamorous relationships and a bunch of different sexualities and intersectionality, and sort of falling into that all at once and feeling very overwhelmed, and sort of seeing this one perspective from Harlow, which actually at the very beginning of the book, I didn't like Harlow because of this. I expected her to be very basic feminism without taking any kind of intersectionality into consideration, and that's exactly how she was. So that's also something Juliet has to deal with, is sort of her idols not living up to her expectations. But she's also sort of discovering how good it can feel to find people like you and find a place where you can just be who you are and not constantly have to pick and choose what parts of yourself you're letting other people see. And I really enjoyed this. I ended up giving it 4 stars for all of the reasons I just talked about. So at points it felt like a little informational, like a lot of almost textbook-like describing of terms and stuff, but I mean, I could totally forgive it for all that. I gave it 4 stars, really enjoyed it. Next is Women Heroes of World War II by Catherine J. Atwood. This is a nonfiction book, and I sort of read it as a companion to Codename Verity, and it's just about women who participated in World War II as like resistance workers or in official military capacity. I think there were like 27 stories, and it sort of went by region. So each section started with a sort of description of what is going on in the war in this country during what times, and then it goes into the parts that each woman played. It was pretty interesting. Yeah, it didn't blow my mind or anything, and it got really repetitive because of what I just said. Like, every chapter started describing the war from a certain country's perspective, so you're kind of hearing it over and over and over again throughout the whole book. So I would suggest, if you want to read this, you read it a little at a time. Don't read it in one go. Okay, I have 8 minutes and 4 books left. Wait, no, three books left. Okay, we can do it. Furyborn by Claire Legrand. This is a young adult fantasy. I'd say it borders on new adult. The characters are a little older. I don't know, it didn't really feel YA to me, but not that it's inappropriate for YA. YA readers. Anyways, this sort of follows two timelines where in this fantasy world, I can't remember the first character's name. Anyways, there's this one girl who is sort of a royalty adjacent person with magical abilities that are being hidden because she's so powerful. And one day after the prince is threatened, his life is threatened, her powers are revealed to everyone, and people are afraid that she is the bad part of a prophecy. This prophecy of two queens, one who will destroy the world and one who will bring it back. So people are afraid she's the bad part of this prophecy, and she has to do these trials to prove that she's not. At the same time, in a different era, there is another girl who is an assassin, and she actually kills people, which never happens when there are assassins in young adult. So she's an assassin in this city where women keep disappearing, and after her mom disappears, she makes a deal with this mysterious guy to do him a favor, and he will help smuggle her and her young brother out of the city. I ended up really liking this. I 100% just read this because of Rachel at Reads with Rachel, who convinced me to read it after I was complaining because I never saw women in fantasy just go like full evil. There's always the good guy who like brings her back into the light, and just once I want to see a girl on the edge of good and evil just go full villain. So she told me I had to read this, and I really enjoyed it. I really liked this sort of mystery aspect that's happening on both sides, and I really enjoyed these like parallels. And the stories are so different, but somehow Claire Legrand still draws parallels between the two timelines. And man, I just really liked it. I liked Eliana as a character. I liked her story more. Thought it was more interesting, and I just really like stabby women. Okay, I don't know where I left off. I had to clear up some space. I did not finish in time. Anyways, Furyborn, 4 stars. I'll definitely read the next one, even though Rachel spoiled me for book 2. Thanks a lot, Rachel. Next was Boyfriend Material by Alexis Hall. This is an adult romance, male romance. Just names are not happening for me today. So we have our main character, I think his name is Oliver. Maybe the other guy's is Oliver. Damn it. Anyways, the main character, who is the son of like a famous rock star from the 70s, 80s, and his dad is moving back into fame because he's a judge on a reality show. And because of that, Oliver is getting, I don't think his name is Oliver. I can't fucking remember. He's getting targeted by paparazzi once again in his life. And because of this, his job is threatened, and he has to find a respectable, upstanding, fake boyfriend. So if you didn't see this coming, that's one of my favorite tropes, which is fake dating. So these two characters have to put on a show, pretend to be dating each other, and they sort of work out an exchange where this guy is going to be his fake boyfriend, and in return, our main character is going to attend a family function with him. And I really liked both of the main characters. I liked the chemistry they had with each other, and they really misunderstand each other at first and grow to get each other's quirks, which is like the best part of a good fake dating trope. It didn't blow my mind or anything. It's British, and the humor is very British and very dry, and by the end of the book I was pretty exhausted of it, but overall it was a good time. It was what I expected and what I needed from an adult romance. I gave it 3.5 stars. Okay, next is The Sunken Mall by Katie Edwards, and luckily, because I'm running out of time again, I can't really say much about this. It's a novella that takes place between the Last Son and the Hanged Man in the Tarot Sequence series, and I have a whole reasons to read video on the Last Son, which you should check out up here, and read the book because I'm obsessed with it. This novella was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it, and it's just more like, it doesn't add to the whole plot of like the overarching plot of the series, but it was like a fun little side quest with some good character development stuff. There was especially a moment between the main character Rune and the love interest Adam that I really liked, because there was something in the first book that made me a little uncomfortable, and they kind of resolved that in this section. So I'm glad I read this novella. Oh, I gave it 5 stars because I'm trash for this whole series. Okay, wait, that's it. Oh, done. That took forever. Editing me is gonna hate this. If you read any of these books, let me know in the comments if you want to talk about them. I'd love to. If you read a book you loved in July, please tell me about it. If you like this video, hit like. If you want to keep talking, you can find me on Twitter or Instagram at Kelsey Reads, or Goodreads at Kelsey Lynn Reads. Did this in the wrong order again. If you want to see more, subscribe. I post book related videos every single Wednesday. Otherwise, I'll see you next week.